Now, I put a lot of thought into what type of barbecue to do for this DBQ. We have some classic styles. You have the Memphis barbecue, you got Kansas City barbecue, you got Carolina barbecue, and I think they do something in Texas too. But I wanted to do something different. Did you ever have a meal that just changed your life? Yeah, I have too. And one of them was in 2008. I was in Seoul, Korea, at a restaurant, and I had this dish called bulgogi. And it literally means in Korea, fire meat. This is Korean barbecue. And this is a world history class, so I thought it would work out well. So let's get cooking some bulgogi. Now, right at the beginning, I want to talk about one of the most important things in cooking that's also true of writing DBQs. And the French have a phrase for this. They call it Misonplas. And what Misonplas means is that you get everything ready before you start. You put prep work into it. You don't just start cooking. Have you ever been into a recipe and you're at step 5 and it says add a cup of onions to the melted butter? And your butter's already melted, but you haven't cut the onions yet. So mise en place means you have everything measured, you got everything chopped and shredded, cut, diced, and you're ready to go. You're more likely to get through it in a decent amount of time with little frustration, and it's no different with the DBQ. So let's get our mise en place with the bulgogi, and then we'll look at the mise en place for the DBQ. So here we have everything set out in front of us, ready to go. We have the measured sugar, the grated ginger, the soy sauce, the meat, the toasted sesames, the rice vinegar, the chopped up garlic, the pear, and the onion. We're all ready to go. Now, what does the mise en place look like for a DBQ? Let's take a look. So as a quick reminder, here's your basic DBQ. And remember, if you forget the rubric items, they're right on the front. Think of that as the recipe for the DBQ. Now, even more important is the second page, because the second page not only begins the documents, but it has this. It has the prompt. This is extremely important. So let's look at this prompt. It says, evaluate the extent to which Qing empire building transformed elites in China between 1600 and 1900. Now this is going to own you for the time that you're dealing with this essay. So what we want to first do is turn this into a question. So this is pretty easy. The question we're going to have for this is simply, how did Qing empire building change elites in China? You hold that question in your mind as we go through these documents and find evidence within the documents that answers that question. Now, here are the other documents in this DBQ, and I only show you this because I want to remind you that one of the documents is going to be a non-text-based document. So here we have a data set. You could have a map, you could have an image, a picture, a photograph, or anything like that. So let's get our mise en place with this DBQ. So we turn to the 5 documents, and we hold that question in our mind that we created from the prompt, and we look for evidence of that question inside the documents. And there's going to be something in all the documents, by the way, that helps you answer that question. So as you're going through the documents, you carefully and closely read them by holding that question in your mind, and you annotate them. Now, you may have printed the DBQ, you may have to just take notes on a piece of paper. Either way is fine, but we're looking for keywords and phrases that give us specific evidence about how elites changed in China. Now, once you've underlined or circled those key terms, what you do next is you write something in the margin. Now, it's my opinion that you shouldn't summarize the document in the margin, because what you've done by underlining and circling is really enough for that. What this annotation should be is a specific link back to that question. How does this document answer the question, how did Qing empire building change elites in China? Now, we'll go into more detail in a second about these annotations, but basically, once you get them done, you go through the documents. Now you look at the annotations, and you'll begin to see that you can cluster some of the documents together because they give a common answer, or they work well together. They should pop out at you as you read these. So once you've seen documents that you could potentially put together in single paragraphs, you kind of mentally pull them aside in your mind, and you tell how those documents give a common answer to the question, how did Qing empire building change elites in China? So for these 2 documents, you might find that the Qing government increased the number of Manchus in the bureaucracy, increased them over and above the number of Han Chinese. And with the remaining documents, you might find that these documents tell us that as the Qing came to power, The importance of Confucian scholarship among elites actually declined. Now, you could have another third claim, that's fine. You could have 2 documents in a paragraph, 2 in a paragraph, and 1 by itself in a paragraph, that's fine. There's no one way to do this. It's what you do with the documents. But at this point, you perform a little check. You go back to that question that we made out of the prompt, and you see if these 2 historical claims give a historically specific answer to that question. So let's check it out. Our question is, how did Qing empire building change elites in China? All right, let's look at the first claim. This one says that as Qing came to power, the importance of Confucian scholarships among elites declined. The second one says the Qing government increased the number of Manchus in the bureaucracy. So yes, there's another change in elites. Now on the test, you're not going to actually cut the documents apart and move them around like this. So what you're doing on the test would actually look more like this. You'll make a T-chart, or maybe 3 columns. You'll write those claims at the top. You simply list the number of documents that support each of these claims. Now when you reach this point, you've got your Misonplas. That's because, just like with cooking, you're now prepared to start working. Your prep work is done, and you've already got your entire essay planned out. Those statements or claims that you made, well, if they answer the prompt question we created, then they combine to form the thesis statement. Those stacks or columns of documents we made, each column becomes the documents used in a single paragraph. The topic sentence for each of these paragraphs are simply the same claims we made in the thesis. Your prep work, or mise en place, is done. Now, I want to give you just a little bit more information about annotations to help you with your homework with this DBQ. But first, let's get the bulgogi meat out of the marinade and onto the grill. Okay, so let's model what a complete annotation would look like. So let's go to the 5th document and look at this for a second. The first thing you need to do is look at the source line. These have been specifically crafted to give you the opportunity to source the document. So sourcing will be the subject of another video, but we need to set ourselves up for this in the pre-writing or the mise en place. For example, notice that in the attribution line or the source line here, it says that the author was a Chinese nationalist, and it was writing in the last few years of the Qing dynasty. So on the left side of this page or in your notes, you might want to note anything historically relevant to background knowledge you can bring in to situate this document. For example, nationalism. You might mention that the Manchus were foreigners, and so the rise of nationalism led to inevitable tension between the ruling Chinese and Manchu elites. Or you could mention that at this point in the 19th century, the Manchu Qing dynasty was on the decline. China had been humiliated in the Opium Wars, and the Chinese were beginning to blame the Manchu elites, and many Chinese elites rebelled. Note that in both cases here, sourcing showed how both nationalism and this point in Chinese history were relevant to answering the question about changes in Chinese elites. That is absolutely important because that's the topic of this DBQ, and that's the argument that we're making. Now let's turn to the content of this document. Now the author of this document is complaining about favoritism given to the Manchus in getting government posts, which are basically elite positions in Chinese society. So we'll underline the relevant content and make an annotation on the right side that connects this content back to our question. So the idea is to write relevant annotations that keep you from having to constantly go back and reread all the documents. You'll never get through the DBQ if you have to do that. So with this type of pre-writing and organization before you even start to write the essay, your writing of the DBQ will be much more efficient. You'll know what you're doing when you get into it, it will have better organization, and it'll prevent you from having to write your DBQ like this.
Sometimes I'll start a sentence, and I don't even know where it's going. I just hope I find it along the way.
And who wants that? So the bulgogi meat is off the grill, and we're going to put the food together now. So what we have are some leaves of lettuce. We're going to put the meat in the lettuce with some rice, some diced up red cabbage, carrots, green spring onions, and some kimchi as well. A little bit of heaven and a piece of lettuce.